I think that we are here and ready to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second in our series on forensic peer mentoring. My name is Rosalind Hayes, and this series is putting stakes in the ground. And so my name is Rosalind Hayes. I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is that I do what's necessary to suit up and show up for my life on a daily basis. Today, I am a homeowner, pet owner, my nephew's favorite and coolest aunt, and my mother is very proud of me today. And so I will be brief in my introduction. I am the Chief Operations Officer at the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network, supporting our peer support, wellness, and respite centers around the state. And I have the pleasure of doing this work with my colleagues, Chris Johnson and Heather James. And Chris, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Roz. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Chris Johnson. I'm a person in long-term recovery and the interim executive director of the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network. And when I'm not that interim, I am the full-time director of communications for Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network. I apologize for my connection today, but I promise you I am 100% there with you. It just looks like I am in a field of green somewhere. So thank you all for being here. We're very excited about this series and the opportunity to be here with you today. So our colleague, Heather James, has been temporarily dismissed from Zoom, and she is trying to get back in with us. So we're going to give her just a moment to get back connected. See, is Hank here with us?
Hank is here.
Hank is here. Hank, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself, sir?
Sure. So my name is Hank Arnold, and I am the founder and director of a recovery community organization called Coweta Force. We are located about 35 miles south of Atlanta, and we exist to provide recovery support services for individuals and family members impacted by addiction. And what drives my passion to do this work every day is that I'm also a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is it's been almost 14 years since I've had a drink or a drug to change the way I experience life. And I speak out about my recovery because I want for everybody to have the opportunities that I've had to get and stay well. And as a matter of fact, I would rather have people have better opportunities than I had to get and stay well. That's my real truth. When I found recovery, things didn't look the way they do in my state and in my area now. And I would say a large part of that is because of the unification amongst our recovery community and our allies and our community supporters. So I love doing this work, and I'm grateful to be here today. I am a present husband, father, homeowner, taxpayer. I'm involved in my community. I'm involved in my faith community, and really cool things have happened as a result of making that decision and having the opportunities to get connected to community support. So I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Muted, Chris.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Hey, so good to see you, as always. One of my favorite faces and voices of recovery. Because you do carry the message so well and you do the work so beautifully. I'm seeing what has happened in Coweta County is just amazing. And whoever would have thunk it that just a few years after we first met there in the church cafeteria, I think the first time, small classroom, that we'll be here today celebrating the success of what you've done and what you and your community have done together, really. And we are just, let's hear about it. So did Heather make it back on?
It looks like she is here. Yes.
I am back on. Zoom does not want to cooperate with me and my camera, so I do apologize. It's trying to restart the camera. But I am here. Oh, I think it's getting ready to work.
All right, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Heather?
Yes. Hi, my name is Heather James, and I am a person in long-term recovery. And so what that means to me is that it has been probably a little over 5 years, since I have allowed my mental health challenges to prohibit me from living the life that I wanted to live. I am able to be present for my family, my friends, and for my job. I no longer have to kind of hide behind a mask and feel ashamed of my diagnosis. I'm able to live a life being my true, authentic self. Thank you.
Heather, what do you do for the network?
Sorry, this Zoom being messed up has had me all out of sorts. Sorry. I work for the network, work for Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network. I have just been promoted to their new Chief Training and Development Officer. So I'm excited for this new role and this opportunity, and to just work with the network and other agencies and our peers throughout Georgia to provide trainings and to listen to what type of trainings they need in order to be better peer specialists and how we can support them in their roles.
Thanks, Heather. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. We're still looking for another panelist, but it doesn't look like she's made it in yet. So Hank, we'll start. And the first question that we have for you is what's right with recovery in Coweta County?
Oh, what a huge question. So I literally just met with some of the leadership down in Troup County that has asked me to help them figure out what does peer support services look like for their community. And so what an honor and a privilege, right, to be able to give it away. It's so huge to me, because I had so many people pour into me and believe in me and want to support me in the work that I do today, that if I can be that for somebody else is huge. So I just met with three other leaders of nonprofits along with the RCO development team for the Georgia Council for Recovery, and we were just discussing next steps. And so I would say for me that is what is right, is being able to give that away, what we have in our community, to our neighboring county, and help them develop something. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest things for me is like that we do this work in a way that is cooperative. It's in the spirit of cooperation. It's in the spirit of lifting up the lived experience, the peer voice. And then if I can keep my eye focused on the goal, which is recovery in communities, then everybody gets to walk away a winner. And we've been able to foster some of that stuff. And we had some hardships in our community when we started. And so if I can share some of my experience about bumps in the road that we've experienced and easier ways to navigate some of these the ability to start some of these grassroots movements. I love to be able to, save people some of the struggles that aren't necessary.
Yeah, Hank, it's so good that you say that, because you reminded me of a conversation I had maybe 3 months ago with someone who came to me with like all of like, someone was open in Georgia, and what can we do to stop them? I was like, no, that's the point. We want to rest in every community. We don't own the idea of respite. Like the whole idea is that we broke ground and we made respite possible in the places where it is, and we my predecessors, I should say, not we, had to work with city councils and the zoning people and all these different people to make it happen, because they were so objected to when they first came into the communities. But now the idea that someone else wants to do this is so exciting, because having more people participating in the whole process, the community change process, helps it. So yeah, the passing it on is something that we are all about here, and it's but making sure people understand that is something that we struggle with from time to time. But forensic peer mentors just generally, we want them in every community, right? We want them everywhere there's law enforcement. We want forensic peer mentors to be there working with them, or certified peer specialists to be there working with them. So yeah, thank you. But what was next, Roz? I'm sorry, I jumped in there. I'm going to leave you alone now.
I'm going to pass it to Heather for the next thing.
Yeah. So this is our second webinar in our 4-part series. And so I'm afraid kind of jump too deep within questions. On our first series, we kind of did like a little overview of like forensic peer mentors. And so just from your opinion, Hank, can you give us your definition of how you define the role of a forensic peer mentor?
So, I mean, when it comes to the forensic peer mentor piece, obviously it's going to be somebody with lived experience with justice involvement in the past. Where you can, so for me it is all about reentry is a big word, but I love pre-release work, the ability to get into, and this is where the partnerships come into place, because we have so many partnerships within so many systems that I don't want to get in the weeds too much, right? But some of the systems that we have in our nation are just really, really challenging to navigate, and one being criminal justice system. Um, but if we can get in to have access to people that I want to have access to, right? Um, in an incarcerated situation, we have to have strong partnerships with the leadership of those organizations. So it requires those partnership, it requires trust, it requires being a good provider to have access to the population. That's first and foremost. And the second part is being able to have access to the population that they are serving, so that we can do this pre-release work. So it's all about the relationship for me. It's all about, when you look at peer support, we're coming from a lived experience perspective, and that we have the opportunity to go into these facilities, right? These detention centers, these prisons, these jails, and be able to share our lived experience, but then also have that connectivity to the recovery community outside of that setting, to where we can help people navigate what their next steps are. And for me, anytime the peer support's involved, what's at the foundation is hope, right? And oftentimes the individuals that I connect with in those settings do not have a lot of hope. And the facilities that they are housed in aren't operating from a place of hope at all. And so when we bring that, it's like a breath of fresh air. I mean, and then people start to really believe that they have some choices, and that they have some options, and that they too can get and stay well, if they can connect to this community. So that is ultimately, that's what we want to do in these settings, is the pre-release relationship building, establishing of these relationships. And we obviously want to partner with these individuals once the release happens, to help them navigate what their next steps are. So that for me is what the forensic peer mentor is all about.
Thank you, Hank. And I that thing about hope, I can remember the first time I heard the phrase "we'll hold the hope for you." I just, that was really powerful for me. And thinking about partnerships and relationships, what steps did you take to ID the appropriate community partners or stakeholders, and how did you engage them?
Okay, so I'm just going to warn you, I'm going to sound a bit like a stalker. Uh, but I've got to be honest with you about, because this was important to me, and this allowed me to identify the people that were gonna be my first steps, right? So most people in leadership positions, their profiles and their education may be on LinkedIn, maybe on different social media platforms, different positions that they've held. I always look for people that have a social work type background or a ministry type background, because I feel like those people in these settings are my people, right? That they're doing this heart work with other individuals in this setting. But I always try to do my research, and I really try to partner with, and how can I align what our mission and our goal is with their mission and their goal? They're going to be able to, essentially it's like, how do I speak the language that they're going to understand? So my first interaction with our county jail was, our first partnership was in the sheriff's office. Was I went for coffee with the chaplain, and it was supposed to be a 30-minute ordeal, a 30-minute interaction. It ended up being almost 3 hours, and it was just really good. And then from there, I moved into the social worker. And then from there, I moved toward the leadership of the jail, and then eventually to the sheriff. And so it was kind of like I had an introduction of somebody that got and understood what our mission is, and then they turned around and shared that information with a colleague and did an introduction. So I started at a place that I felt like somebody could hear my language and really get behind what we were doing that had influence within that system. And those are hard systems. I've never worked so hard to get into the jail in my entire life. But it was about a 9 month process of relationship building before they allowed me to come in. And a lot of that too, I was sending emails asking questions, and I stopped getting responses to my questions, and I just started sending updates that if we had worked with a person that had been previously incarcerated within their system, that if we got connected with them, if I got their permission to share their story at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months of recovery and where they were with photos, I just started sending updates, monthly updates on people that we had been able to connect with that were justice involved, that were no longer being served in that county jail. You know, that was a way that we were able to show them.
A lot of creativity and persistence, it sounds like. I love that, just sending updates, you know. Thank you for that, Hank. I'll give it back to you, Heather.
Yeah. What would you say when you think about all the legwork that went into with connecting and making these partnerships successful? What are the three components that you probably can ID that helps to create those successful partnerships in this recovery work with your law enforcement or within these community centers?
That's a great question. And I feel like so many of these are overlapping. Number one, the ability to be genuine and authentic, right? Number two, mutually beneficial relationships that everybody gets to walk away a winner. You know, and the third piece is having impeccable integrity with your word and what you're doing. I feel like as peer support, as forensic peer mentors, as peer support specialists, that we have eyes on us. And I feel like too, peer support is relatively new. I mean, you know, I feel like we have an added responsibility to just do and have that sort of integrity component, because I feel like we have a responsibility to the people that started this movement around peer support, because they fought really, really, really hard and are working within these systems to change these systems, that we have a responsibility to do them justice and make them proud for the how they established and move this forward. But also, if we aren't doing this work with integrity, it's also going to impact our future ability to provide peer support in these spaces and in these systems. And this is not about Hank as an individual. This is not about Coweta Force as an organization. This is about a movement as a whole, that we have a responsibility to represent that movement and do that well. So I would say, you know, and the other piece for me is partnering with the sheriff's office on, they have something called a Citizens Academy here at the Coweta County Sheriff's Office, and you can sign up for a 6 week class. It's 2 hours once a week on Thursday nights to learn about every different service that they offer between jail, between narcotics division and canine division, that you can show up. And so I signed up for the Citizens Academy. Quarterly, they have something called Coffee with a Cop, that's something they do for the community. We show up for them when they have volunteer opportunities. Um, every year around this time, they assemble bikes for underserved kids for Christmas, and so we organize a team as people in recovery, and we show up and help assemble those bikes. So we also, that's that mutually beneficial partnership. We're also a good partner to their agency and to their organization. So I would say that those things are very, very valuable.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the chat real quick because there is a question that was submitted. One person they wants to know about how do you help with advocacy. They talked about how they read an article about individuals in prison not receiving their medication. that they needed to deal with their mental illnesses, specifically schizophrenia. Their symptoms came back and then they became violent again, and they're stuck in this system. So I want to know, how do you work on advocacy with these peers while they're still stuck in the prison system?
Oh, that's a great question. I think too, when you look at advocacy efforts on something like that, I'll really look at it from a larger scope, like a statewide perspective. I think it's very important to get to know your lawmakers, your senator, your House of Representatives, people that have a vested interest in these efforts. That is that's a whole system that we're working against. I know that for Georgia, the Georgia prison system right now is probably the most unsafe that it has ever been. And unfortunately, the Georgia Department of Corrections is Georgia's #1 provider for folks with substance use and mental health challenges, and they're not even trained to be a provider. So they're not assuming the responsibility of this is the population that we're working with. I can also say too that I know a lot of people that go enter that system and may have some struggles from a mental health perspective or a substance use perspective, and by the time they do their time and get out, they have gone from something that was like manageable with some skills and maybe some medication to being in a much, much worse place upon discharge with zero support coming out. And it's just heartbreaking to see. Again, this is like, so I appreciate the question, but I'll look at that question. That's one example amongst, I don't know how many. And so I really look at this advocacy work as it's important that when there's mental health day at the Capitol or there's substance use recovery day at the Capitol, or you have an opportunity to connect with a senator, a legislator, a lawmaker, a lobbyist, or somebody that's doing this work, why that's so valuable, that it is not necessarily the perspective of one particular organization or county or provider. This is the perspective on an entire system. And so how do we invoke systems change across the board? And it's really difficult. And I would say too, if there's a counselor within an organization that has a heart for this work, it's all about the relationships. That if you know somebody within an organization that is a mover and a shaker that somebody respects amongst their peer group, those are always good people to have in your back pocket, to have a relationship with, to get things done within a system. And it's a very unfortunate situation. So I wish I had a really good answer for that, but it's so different based on the individual. Everything's so individualized. But I think that our criminal justice system has got to do a better job um, of providing care and support for individuals in these situations.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, so when you think about all the work that you have done with creating these partnerships and working within the community, what do you say was the biggest challenge you faced when it came to integrating forensic peer mentors, or the whole concept of recovery into your community in general, with law enforcement in particular?
I would say the biggest challenges that I face is always stigma. It's always, always, always on whatever front it is, be it criminal justice involvement, be it community involvement, it's always stigma. And I always, it's funny because I get the opportunity regularly to speak in front of civic groups and organizations. I think it's very important that I introduce myself as a person in recovery, and that I regularly introduce myself as a returned citizen from the criminal justice system. That in the late '90s, I served 3 years in prison behind some poor decisions that I made as an 18-year-old, I would say, child. That I served 3 years and got out when I was 21 with even less support than I went in with. And the impact that that system had on me didn't set me up for success at all, around sustainability, around support, around employment. And I regularly speak out and say those things. But I think the biggest piece is stigma. And I think the way that we combat stigma is we tell our stories. And I think the way that not only do we tell our stories, but the way in which we show up consistently with integrity to provide the services that we provide, we've been able to change the hearts and minds of service providers that was very reluctant to partner with us based on our action, based on based on our perspective as peers and people in recovery going and providing these services, that we have been able to try and change the hearts and minds of folks in a part of that criminal justice system just based on how we conduct ourselves and interact with people that may not be pleasant to interact with, that we just hold ourselves to a higher standard and keep it moving. And we focus on where the energy's at, and we don't spend a whole lot of time on stuff that we can't change. However, we have that responsibility. So I would say the biggest thing that we combat is stigma, as being a people in recovery, as also being people that have a pretty lengthy criminal history. But I also have a full governor's pardon that I got in 2014 that also speaks to something. They don't just pass those out. So I think that is the ability for me to. My identity isn't rooted necessarily in this sort of returned citizen piece, this person that is an offender, as they like to oftentimes refer to me as, an ex-felon or ex-offender, that I don't identify with that label, and it's allowed me to kind of walk out of that. But I think those things speak for themselves.
Thank you. Chris or Ross, do you have any follow-up questions or comments? I don't want to overlook you guys.
I just wanted to ask Hank just a general kind of question, and that is there's so much that goes into the success that you've achieved, and I just want to ask you, and that you all have achieved, that you've achieved within your county, and I just want to ask you if there's anything that you would like to share with us. We can't think of every pertinent question. So is there anything, any information, anything that you would just like to share, for folks who are interested in doing this work, just on how to go about it and how to be successful with it?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, 2 weeks ago, I had a really, really meaningful interaction. We also have a county prison here. It's a work camp. So they have a lot of autonomy, even though they are part of the Georgia Department of Corrections. They have a lot of autonomy on how they function as a organization, based on them being smaller and based on it being like maybe a lower level. But I had a wonderful interaction with this young lady. She is a kitchen staff person. She has her master's degree in counseling, but she is the kitchen staff person. So she is partnered up with an individual that is currently incarcerated there, and they have developed surveys for people that have been rearrested and come back through that system. It's a 20-question survey, and the numbers don't lie, right? The responses don't lie. That overall, the overall overwhelming number of individuals that return to that system were people that didn't have support around mental health, people that didn't have support around substance use, people that didn't have support around housing, and people that didn't have support around employment. Those are the four highest things by a long shot, and we know those. We know that as peer support specialists, those numbers are not shocking to me. To them, they don't. They were like, "How did we miss this?" And I was like, "We've been telling you." But we're developing this partnership with them because she has taken this initiative, this staff person, along with this other individual that is detained out there. He's got an 8-year sentence. He served 3 years on an 8-year sentence. But we are going to start doing some pre-release support in partnership with that system. I'm so thrilled. I'm so excited about it. But I think too that we are, I would say, a young organization. We are a relatively young organization in our 5th year of operation, and made some big, big strides. And a lot of it for me was like going where the energy is. And just because I have obviously a vision for where we want to go as an organization, that from where I sit today and for what we do on a daily basis, it looks nothing like what I thought it would look like in the beginning. And so a lot of it has been the ability to do what makes sense, to go with where the energy is and not try to fit the square peg into the round, what opportunities open up. And essentially, what we've done is the people that have had demonstrated strong partnership with us, we have been able to go after funding opportunities to directly support the population that they're serving because it requires the strong partnership. Without the strong partnership, we don't have the access that we need. Um, so that strong partnerships, letters of support, MOUs, those sort of things. So doing the things in the jail, we're doing some stuff in our juvenile court system right now. We have a grant for that, and we have a separate grant for emergency department services, and then we have funding for the center itself. Like we have all of these things that is sort of creating this ripple effect and a further reach into our community and into specifically intentionally into these systems that have historically not supported people with substance use and or mental health challenges, that we want to be available resource within those systems. And as much as I don't want to be a part of the system, to invoke change in a system, you have to be a part of it. But it has been very enlightening to me that when I'm a part of these systems, that I can also understand how they got here, you know? And as much as I resist it, you have the new person coming out of grad school that's just trying to make a difference in this Division of Family and Children Services, and they get thrown into this dysfunctional system that already operates in this capacity. They've been operating this way 30 years, and they're coming out of grad school trying to make a difference, and they get thrown into the system that could be better, and they become discouraged and they just become a part of like what has been passed down from them. It's a culture that's passed down to them, and it's like, oh, then I start to understand why it is the way it is. And it's really nice to me because we are an independent grassroots organization. So if I say something that's not popular in that staff meeting, my paycheck's not necessarily at stake, but for that young grad student coming out, he or she can't really, that's the status quo. And I'm not like offensive, but I will introduce a question, or I will make a point around something that I feel may be counterintuitive to recovery or to somebody's personal well-being based on it's just what we've always done. But a lot of it for me has been the ability to flex and shift and be, fluid, go where the energy is. And once I establish some of these strong partnerships, go after funding that supports the individuals that will support that partnership further, and just see where it lands. That's probably one of the more exciting things for me, is like I don't ever really know where I'm going to land. Now, while I appreciate stability and predictability around things, there's a fun element of like, just like, hey, I'm just showing up, taking the next step and seeing what lands. Um, and that keeps it really fresh and exciting for me.
Yeah,
I've learned a lot
Hank, I wanted to tell Cindy that. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I've learned one of the things that I like to do is create. I love to create. And a lot of the things around peer support just make sense. Let's be real. Peers in justice involved settings just make sense. Peers in these other settings just make sense. And let's be real, even if it's not from a place of like, what can you guys pay me for these services? Because I feel like my overall objective is to establish enough of a partnership and enough of an outcome that they see the value in it, and they will begin to pay us for these services. And some of these systems have. The correction system is not one of those yet. But even from a cost savings perspective, like if you aren't spending the $26,000 to incarcerate one person in the Georgia Department of Corrections, like where's that 25,000 going? And that even from a cost savings perspective, that's the way that can make sense around, that business mind. You can meet the quantitative and the qualitative data together around this just makes sense. And in the long run, this is going to save us money.
Definitely, definitely. And I know within our first series we shared some data, some research that we found, but just speaking to what you just talked about of how it just makes sense having peers work within the system, I'm gonna kind of reshare some of that data. Um, but in one study, it was titled Time to Prison Return for Offenders with Serious Mental Illness Released from Prison, a survival analysis. And that was published in the Criminal Justice and Behavior Journal. And from Close et al., they found that within their research that, and this is their words, not mine. So people with mental illness return to prison 358 days sooner than those without a mental illness. So it was, if you had a mental health challenge, your days to return into the system was about 385 days versus those who did not have a mental challenge was 743. And taking that even further, that there was a research study where they looked at a forensic peer mentor program called PeerStart LLC, and they showed that individuals who were enrolled in a forensic peer mentor program that had either like a mental health diagnosis or substance use diagnosis, their return rate dropped. So if anybody did return, they saw it at about a 22% versus those who did not work with the forensic peer mentor were returning back into the system at a 43% rate. So there is that proof that shows that working with peers, it works. Let's see.
And we do have a few questions. Let's see here. How do you think about the different levels in the prison system, like preventing people from going to prison in the first place? How do you help them to cope in prison, more of a rehabilitation than a punishment? And then how do you help them once they come out? So maybe like different levels of support.
Right, right. So one of the things that we've implemented here locally is we also have a kiosk. We have an account on our email kiosk. So the first thing that we do, we don't say necessarily this is what we don't do, but we say the first page. So we have 3 pages, and they also allow us to put a 1-30-second video clip on there, sort of as a commercial about what we do. But the first bit is like if you're looking to get in touch with your parole or probation officer, this is the number, and this is like the email. If you're looking to find out what your court date is, all these things. And then the other parts for us is like it could be anything, like somebody that is currently in jail, that may be eligible for a diversion opportunity around a treatment provider where we can help facilitate the acceptance into a treatment provider in lieu of a long-term jail or prison sentence. And I mean, it could be as I mean, all those things. So it's so individualized. And again, it requires one of the things that I'm going to be proposing, and we're about to write a grant proposal for because we have all these opioid settlement dollars that are coming to our state. We're putting together some proposals, but what I'm proposing in our county jail is that we have a recovery pod that they're building 4 more pods in our county jail that are going to open in the next 4 to 5 months as they take and allocate either an old part of the jail or the new part of the jail for somebody that meets a certain profile, that there be a recovery pod and that they get a choice if they engage with that or not. Our sheriff is on board, and I've had some conversations with our county manager, and that it would be staffed by Coweta Force staff. That we would have some sort of 30-day curriculum on a rotation, and if somebody's there more than 30 days, this gives leadership opportunity to somebody that's incarcerated, right? So if you've been there and you've been through that curriculum one time, we can also train you to be a service provider amongst your peers in that space. Um, that is sort of the idea. We're also right now building a duplex for supportive housing. And that would be a good fit for somebody coming out of that system that we already have a connection with, that we know is motivated to do something different with their life, and place them in this duplex. It should be completed. I mean, we're putting the roof system on tomorrow. And this is fully funded by our community. No state or federal dollars are coming it's a large ticket item. It's brand new. It's going to be 3,200 square feet, 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms. It's just a start, right? We just start and see where it organically grows. But again, it requires the strong partnership, that without the strong partnership, the leadership of those facilities, we can't be in there and have access to the population. So a precursor to the service providing in those systems is going to be going after the partnerships and establishing that trust, showing the leadership that we are who we say we are. We're going to do what we say we're going to do. We're also understanding that we're a guest in their facility and that we're going to uphold the things that are important to them as well. So before we even get to providing the peer support services in those settings, it requires the partnership and the strong connection and relationship with the leadership. That is everything. And the more they trust us, the more access we have to their population. Right. And in the beginning, they were telling me what I couldn't, the information I couldn't present. If I had a presentation, I had to send it for approval. Sometimes it would take a month to 6 weeks to get that information approved. And after about a year, they said, you just do whatever you want to do. Whatever you think is effective, you just do it. And so we're kind of like shadows in their facility. We come in, the front person knows us. Hey, Hank, hey, we also provide yoga. The entire female population gets access to a person in recovery that's also a certified yoga instructor once a week. Right. And when we proposed yoga, they were like, what? Like, why would we ever do that? I had the front desk lady that said, yoga, what's next? Cooking classes? Being like cynical. And I was like, you know what? That's a great idea. Do you think that would fly in here? Like, why not? So because of the trust we have, because of those relationships, they have gone from giving us a little bit of access to giving us, hey, whatever you need, you let us know. And so we set our services up at a time that is low impact for them, where they're not doing med call or doing visitation or doing food service. We have worked our schedule around what's best for them, which is Tuesdays between 9 and 11 a.m. and also between 2 and 4 p.m. Those are our windows of opportunity. So we just come in, they know what we do and they know who we are, and they just let us do our thing. So again, strong partnerships is everything with them being able to provide those services. The stronger our connection, our partnership to the leadership, and the more respect we have amongst those folks that work in this system, the easier it is to get in and access the population that we want to serve, and the more impact we can have.
Thank you. I know Chris responded to a person, but there was a question dropped down in our chat that talked about barriers with clearance, saying that they currently are working with DBHTD to problem solve, but they said their captain explained that due to their background for audit purposes, that they are unable to be cleared for the jail. And so she was wondering, have you guys ran into those problems? Have you experienced that? And then kind of what were some things that you were able to put in place or do or work with to overcome those obstacles?
So every jail, this is just the truth. They can do what they want to do. If they want to allow access for folks that have a criminal history, a lot of it too is going to be like, what are you working towards? So a lot of them want. So our jail there are a few things, and I think it's fair, right? We want for somebody to have not been arrested for 12 months, and we need somebody, whoever you're bringing in, to not be on active supervision, meaning parole and probation. I think that's fair. I have been a part of background checks that they didn't want anybody providing services to have any criminal history at all, which I don't believe is realistic. And I feel like there's conversations around how do we overcome these barriers. And again, I know this sounds just redundant. It's all about those relationships, right? And being able to show your impact, being able to prove that can be a trusted resource provider and a respected resource provider, and that you're going to respect what their wishes are while you're in their facility. That I've seen them go from something that even for us, like that has changed. They wanted, when we first started, they didn't want anybody to have been arrested for 5 years. And we've gotten it down to 12 months, just based on our relationship and based on us just asking. A lot of times it's like, can we, but if it's a no, we just try to work within the parameters of what they do require. But again, once you get in there and start to get the ball rolling and start to produce results, one of the things that we also do is we keep data, because we access that population regularly. We keep data. What we've shown, what our research has shown, is that 14% of people last year we served 808 people in that system. Out of 808 people, 14% of those people had more than 3 interactions with us upon release. That's a huge win. 14%. I feel like it could be bigger. And we don't necessarily say, oh, that they stayed substance free this long or that they did this long. But let's be honest, for people that have 3 or more interactions with us upon release, that's a good sign. So we try to track that data and those numbers. We enter that stuff. We keep up with that. We track that data. If somebody comes into our center and they check the box that they first encountered services with us from the sheriff's office or from a correctional setting, we track those numbers really hard and really closely to be able to show them, hey, this is effective. And through us being able to produce some of those outcomes and share that data with these justice systems, they're feeling like they're contributing to their wellness from giving us access, which allows us to sort of negotiate some of these terms and conditions around what makes sense.
Thank you.
Hank, are you tracking in your data the transportation issue? Because one of the things we've discovered in like finding out like when and how people are not like participating in the services, that transportation, just getting to the services, is a huge challenge for a lot of folks, and the primary reason they stop participating. Because outside of like Metro Atlanta and a couple other like urban settings, there is no public transportation, or not real public transportation, in most of Georgia. So I was just wondering if you all are looking at that.
Yeah, so we track transportation services across the board. So a lot of it would be we use what's been the easiest for us and platforms to use has been Jotform has a HIPAA compliant, uh, and I like Jotform because you create your own forms. It's not a. We also utilize Recovery Link, which is also a HIPAA compliant database developed out of Philadelphia from Robert Ashford. We use that data platform for our recovery coaching in our emergency department settings. But the easiest to pull data and reports is Jotform, and they have that HIPAA compliant option that we've opted in for. So we can go to transportation, we can zero in on everybody that we've provided transportation for, and then we can also zero in on people that have first encountered our services at the incarcerated setting. So we can really get down and zero down to that. But that's a huge barrier for us. We also provide transportation, like if we can't actually physically. So a lot of it is around safety too. So if we don't already have a relationship with you and we don't know anything about you, part of my job is to keep my staff safe. And that could be anybody across the board. If we don't know you, if we haven't been working closely with you, we don't send a coach to pick somebody up that we don't have a relationship with. But we do, however, utilize Uber and Lyft for those transportation needs. So we have a budget that we have to. It's not a reimbursable either. So we are raising these funds for our email correspondence in the county jail, as well as this Uber and Lyft stuff. So Uber and Lyft also have grant opportunities that we've applied for. We haven't been selected yet. We're hoping that is something that we can have coming up come the next calendar year, because we do utilize those services so much around transportation to the center, transportation to mental health appointments, to counseling appointments, transportation. We also provide transportation the first 2 weeks to somebody's employment if they're coming out of incarcerated situations, because we know that that's a huge barrier to them getting to and from. We will provide transportation to and from for the first 2 weeks. until
Wow.
somebody gets paid. Yeah. So we just try to eliminate all those barriers, and we don't necessarily get reimbursement. We don't have a grant for that. So those are like additional funds that we raise that we've identified these as being big, big barriers to people. So we think that's a good use of our funding for people to eliminate some of the barriers until they can get on their feet.
Definitely,
That's
definitely. That's
awesome.
awesome work. Awesome work. There is another question posted that talks about, I know you talked about some like stigmas being an obstacle. And so this individual is asking, are there any techniques to change and alleviate stigma associated with those in prison, both the actual prison environment, including the workers, and the general population?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot that we can do through our relationships, through our partnerships. Is one of the things that we're starting in the beginning of next year is a reentry coalition. We're very intentional about that. We need a representation from everything, all things law enforcement or all things reentry, a seat represented. So we're going to be intentional within that reentry coalition is having a returned citizen kick us off every month. That's going to be the start of our meeting every single month. There's going to be a returned citizen that's a person in recovery. That's going to, kind of at least give their elevator speech, 3 to 5 minutes, to kick us off with our meeting because the foundation is hope there, and that we're utilizing peers with lived experience. And then we'll also be putting in stigma reduction language. We're going to be doing recovery messaging. All those things will be a part of these reentry coalition meetings. And since we're developing it, we get to be in charge of what the agenda is. And then also these other systems at the sheriff's office, once you get in and get some good partnerships, if they have trainings or they have a monthly meeting where they're discussing what's going well and what adjustments need to be made, even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes, we'll get a 10 or 15-minute slot at these team meetings. And we'll be very intentional. Obviously, it will be condensed information because we only have a 10 to 15-minute time slot, but they're being intentional to give us some time. So those are also good ways to disseminate information within these systems, is to craft that message based on what your time restraints are and go in there and hit it hard um, with the information, back it up with data, back it up with statistics, and back it up with quantitative data as well. You don't only want to come with qualitative. You want to come with you don't only want to come with quantitative. You want to come with qualitative data. Is like, take a person that was incarcerated in that jail. We have one of our one of our staff members is a young lady we met in that yoga service in that county jail 4 years ago. She's our grant writer today. She is finishing up her human resources certification to do our employee development training and keep all that together. So when I can bring her, that has been arrested multiple times in that setting from some of these people, and she's coming in presenting her story and it's coming from her, that's the game changer, right? That has been the biggest way to combat stigma, is using our lived experience, using a face, using a voice that they're familiar with, that shows that recovery works. And that is the biggest way to combat stigma without saying, "Oh, we're going to combat stigma." We do it through we do it through what we do, not through what we say a lot of times.
Thank you. You've done a lot of amazing, amazing work when it comes to just recovery, working with peers, keeping people hopeful. But if you could travel back in time, was there anything that you feel like you would do differently? Like, what's one thing that you would whisper to yourself to make that pathway from cohesive force being an idea to cohesive force being a reality, or a model for how recovery and law enforcement can work together successfully?
Gosh, that is a good question. I try to live with like no regrets. Obviously there are things that I would go back and do differently, but even the things that I totally screwed up, I learned so much. I would say number one, know your audience. I would say number two, get in front of as many. So, I feel like from a recovery perspective, we're always speaking to the recovery community or people that are involved in recovery-based initiatives. but one of the things that's been most beneficial for us as a provider trying to provide peer support in our community is getting in front of these organizations that don't do this work, that aren't familiar with recovery. Get in front of your Rotary Club, get in front of your Kiwanis Club, set up a booth at your Kiwanis Club. Like, go to the places where recovery doesn't have a voice at all and is rarely considered to be important, and start doing some of this messaging amongst those populations. We've seen incredible partnerships and incredible opportunity as a result of, and we all know that everybody knows someone, right? So even if it's not in that group of Rotarians or Kiwanis Club members, they have a son or a grandson or a daughter or a wife, and they will pull you aside and talk about that stuff. It does happen. They will reach out about somebody that they love that is personally struggling. So that would probably be the thing that I would recommend from the beginning, getting in front of some of these sectors and these populations that don't. I would also say too, find you a newspaper editor in your local newspaper. One of the things that hands down was a big benefit for us was having an editor that believed in our mission, and then also having her go through the recovery messaging course that we provide here at the center. So that when they do articles and are promoting you or doing stories on you to the general public, that they're using pro recovery messaging, right? That they're using reduced language, and lifting up the voice of recovery. That way that they can write articles about you. And that also gets you out to a larger population than just the population that you serve. I would say doing those things sooner would probably have put us in a better position to be supported by our community as a whole. And we found that out a little bit later. But I don't know that I would change a whole lot. Every bit of what we've learned has gotten us where we are, even if it's like the total bombs and failures, you know?
All right, Heather, I think it's about time for us to do the thing. But before we do that, Hank, thank you. Thank you for everything you do in the community, for the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network, and for being here and sharing that experience, strength, and hope that we all rely on.
Yes.
And I will let it go with that.
Thank you, Hank.
Thank
The work
you.
you're doing, yeah. I'm sorry. The work you're doing is amazing. It's an honor just to know you. And the information that you share will help so many people. So just thank you. And keep doing what you're doing.
I know a person asked about contact information. If you didn't see it, Hank did drop his email in the chat for you guys. Also, just to remind you guys that there is a survey that you can take about this webinar. The link has been provided to you guys in the chat as well. After you complete your survey, it should redirect you to get your CEUs to use as well.
Yeah, so if you want CEUs, you have to do the survey. If you want CEUs, you have to do the survey. Thanks to the Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center for having us, and thank you, Heather, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Hank.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Do well, everyone.